grab a seat, and that'd be great. That's how I'll take that off your hands. Thank you very much, Chris. If I could ask the rest of the speakers today to come and join us on stage. Just again, how much was that award that was $50,000?
$50,000.
$50,000.
Yeah. And you can't win it, I'm afraid.
No, I think well, it's over 60. Yeah. So the part there that we're talking about, Microsoft Ventures, that's Microsoft's startup investment arm. That's Microsoft, a big global company, realizing they really need to get involved in the startup culture. Because at some point, Microsoft were a startup business. You know, they're... Okay, yeah, I think I'll stand. I'm okay if... Yeah, thanks. Yeah, please, go on. So Microsoft, this great big massive company that produces arguably one of the best games consoles in the world, and their mobile phones are getting a lot better since they bought Nokia, are now realizing, and have realized for quite a while, and the slide that I put up that said attractive, innovative, and relevant came to me through a visit to Microsoft in Silicon Valley. And the lady at the time, Claire Mack, who had headed up their venture setup, said, we're not sexy, we're not innovative, and we're not relevant in the startup culture, and we really are trying hard to get in there. The opportunity for you guys is to take advantage and win that 50,000. So we're going to have a Q&A from the panel today. I've asked you to have a think about questions, older and younger people in the room. There's a couple of roving mics going around. So hands in the air, anybody with a question for anyone in the panel so far? Here we are, question at the front. Hang on, somebody will come with you with a microphone, because otherwise we won't hear you at the back. If you could tell us your name and the school you're from, first of all, please.
Jonathan Duncanson, Hamilton College.
Hi.
You've all talked about the future of proprietary software. One of you is from Microsoft. But none of you talked about the future of open source, Linux, Red Hat, Canonical Limited, the list goes on. Any thoughts on that?
So first of all, before you leave the room, I think there's at least 2 people here will want to give you their business card, okay? There's no doubt about it. Maybe, Sherry, first of all, would that be okay to talk about that? And then we can move our way through the panel. Open source, we hear a lot about it, but you know, what is it and what do you think it will mean in the context that the gentleman's asking?
I think open source is extremely important, and I think that it is absolutely the way that we go forward. I mentioned this, that we're launching the Founders for Schools. We did that off of the government data. It took us less than a day to create a service that was fully available here in Scotland, because the data had been made available open source. I think it's really critical. It's also the basis. I told you I was a board member of Raspberry Pi. That is entirely based. It's very much open source, and it's very much on the sharing economy and working together to move things forward. So I think you're spot on in the question, and it's absolutely vital. Sometimes you can't achieve some things not by open source, but you can achieve enormous amounts, and the world wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for that movement, which is critical.
Robbie, maybe as a developer, how important is open source to you?
We're slightly parasitical. We move where the mass market is. So if there was 20 million people using Linux, we'd look at doing an app there on a common platform. So I think it'll mature, it'll spread out, and then there'll be a market for us there, and we'll move into it. So there's money to be made.
And Sally, maybe from the public sector, do you see open source being vital to what you're doing?
I'm looking at not exactly as how you're talking about it, but actually what I'm building with apps is open source. It has to be open source, it has to be open code, because basically I'm building things I want to be scalable and shareable. I actually want to build generic apps that we can reuse for different purposes, so we have to work like that.
On the Appathon, the data source for most of the apps that have been featured in the last 3 years were open source and were government data. So if we didn't have the government sources of data that were available, you wouldn't have content and an IP that you could turn into it. You look at Zoopla, which is a company that I cut them their first check, apparently. I didn't know it was, but they floated recently. And last week they went over $1 billion in valuation. They started up with an open source database of where the houses were located and what they were sold for. They happened to put it all into a database so they could see what the prices and changes were. But if they hadn't done that, there would be no company. And that all started because the government had been collecting information on where the houses were and what they were being sold for, so for tax purposes, that they made that available, and it's created an enormous economy that all of us can benefit from enormously. You talked about the bins and where they were. What a fantastic use of of open data. It's the many billions. In fact, it was my quote on the $1 trillion company, and it was because of the health services, because there are enormous databases of information on the people that live here, and on their diseases, and on their tissue types, and you can use reverse cohort analyses to solve really enormous problems. And I've been doing a lot of work with Cancer Research UK on looking at those data sets, making them available, using gaming technologies to solve those problems. And if we weren't able to build on open, open data from otherwhere and have the information in machine-readable format, we would be nowhere. But that's why there's 70 job offers for every person who can understand what data science is and what open data is. Yeah. It's critical, and it's key to our future.
I'll get to you in a second, Chris, with that question. But Phil, if I can ask you, I remember a couple of years ago that you were hosting the Glastonbury website that had a massive amount of traffic all of a sudden, because everybody came through the gates, and just chucked every photograph they could get up there, and then it disappeared again after a week. Open source important, that factor for you guys? Hosting that environment?
I think we're going to see, as the, sorry.
Yeah.
Is this one on? Sorry about that. We're definitely going to see more open source applications. Data is referred to as the new oil in our industry, and it probably is. Unfortunately for you guys, I'm probably at the wrong end of it, but we're going to know everything about you soon. Literally, what you eat, how you walk, when you're hungry. And it's all coming. In terms of the Glastonbury thing, we're finding that open source data applications tend to be used for short, sharp, in our industry, short, sharp campaigns. So where you need something spun up very quickly, where it's going to have thousands and thousands of users coming to it, where security and quality of service isn't the main driver. That was the only thing I was going to say about open source. When you're dealing with enterprises and businesses, is who is actually responsible for that code, and in terms of quality of service, et cetera, which is why a lot of us, use the Microsoft type products and things, because it comes fully guaranteed, et cetera. But open source has a massive part to play in the new data generation as we go forward. And data sharing, data sovereignty are going to be the new issues I think we face moving forward.
Thanks for that. Have a think about a question. Get your hand in the air for the next one, just as we finish with Chris, and the microphone will make its way to you. Chris, I know a big play with Microsoft Cloud First, Mobile First, and becoming less restrictive in the software that you run on Microsoft platforms in the cloud now. From an open source point of view, you're dealing with a much wider remit now than you've ever had. Obviously quite deliberate strategy, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a lot of customers like everyone else, and customers will just choose to use whatever they want to use. So, I mean, we're a software company. We produce software for use on many platforms now, and in fact, just recently we launched Office on the iOS platform, and on the Linux platform, which is all quite new for us, really. But I think we as Microsoft understand that we just have to produce the best quality experience and software behind that experience that customers want to use. And frankly, if open source is better, as a better experience for customers will use that. I mean, we do have, and this is really, Apple did this in terms of being very tight on their environment to control the experience, and we will always, I think, have a better experience across a pure Microsoft ecosystem, because you can control the hardware and software and all the elements that make up the experience. It's sometimes easier to do that in a controlled environment. But at the end of the day, we'll be led by our customers, both business and consumer, and we will produce the best software we can in the hope that customers choose our platform.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question from the floor? Hands up, anybody? While you're thinking, got somebody? You, Polly.
Hi there.
But you're not entering for the Imagine Cup, I hope, are you?
No, not today.
Okay, right.
But I thought maybe while the youngsters here are thinking of their questions, if you were all 16 again today, what would you do as a career? What's the most exciting thing you would want to get involved in?
Chris first.
I'd probably enter the X factor. No, I mean, there's no doubt that technology is by the way, I started life in the army as a flying instructor in helicopters, and that was great fun and very exciting. I might do that again, actually, for a short spell. But I think in terms of long-term careers, then there's no doubt technology is the place to be. Now, whether that's technology as in a Microsoft, a Google, or a Facebook, or a smaller company, or if it's just technology which is applied in any other discipline, I think there's no doubt that technology is the place to be. And as an ex-helicopter pilot, I look at the technology coming into the Apache D helicopter, followed by all these drones that are coming out, and it's all military hardware. But that's somebody earlier on was talking about technology, as you, Phil, actually. IT is not PCs and laptops; it's everything. And if I look at the technology and some of that hardware, and if you're not into the military side of things, and just look at the cars and the airplanes and everything else that's being developed at the moment, there's no doubt that I would be involved in technology in some shape or form.
Sally?
I've been thinking about it, and the thing is, I actually have had quite an interesting career, so I don't know if I would really change it. I think if I was starting again, though, I'd maybe jump straight to doing the data thing, because I was a librarian for 15 years, and that's all about data. And that's where we are now, and I think that's really going to be important for at least the next 10 years. But I also think you should all be aware technology is going to change radically within that time, and everything we're talking about now will change again, and who knows what that will be.
We'll work our way along the line. Sherry, what would you do again?
I don't think that there's any possibility of not being involved in technology. It is how I view the world. But I wish I knew a little bit more about physics. I see some of the things that we're doing at Raspberry Pi, and I'm fascinated by that. I see the way that we're using a deeper understanding of sort of some of the more scientific industries, and I think I wish I had a better understanding of that. I've been able to self-teach and continuous education and continuing learning. There are things we're all learning here today. But in formal education, I think that the physics I would have liked to have paid more attention to, because I think it would have allowed me to have more doors open now. I've always been fascinated by numbers, so the data, and I love the data, so I think for me, I've just followed it in different areas. Yeah. The health area, I think, is amazing. I think I love the idea of eradicating cancer during our lifetimes, and I think the only way that we could conceive of doing that is by using data and the machines to understand what the patterns are that have been there all along that we just haven't seen. And I love that as a tool to think that we could make that go away during our lifetimes. Yeah. Very excited about that.
Okay.
I started as an artist, and I actually went to Edinburgh University, did computer science, and flunked out. I failed, and it just turned out programming and me just aren't compatible. And I thought it'd be a fantastic chance to do that again, but probably I would be on to a loser. It just wouldn't work again, I suspect. After X number of years doing video games, working with other people and for other people, only this year, actually, I've finally set up my own business to start doing video game development. And I kind of regret not knowing about business and how to investigate and come up with new business plans and how to set up a business and all the things. I'm only just at like square two, perhaps, of that process, and that's what I do. I do business. I'd learn about all the networking, and not people-to-people networking, but the network that you need to build a business, all the tax and all that stuff. Yeah. Really useful.
I sympathise with that. I mean, we were going through a funding exercise over the last couple of years, and you think you know your business until somebody comes in to try and give you money for it. And then you know your business. Apart from male modelling, Phil, what would you have done at 16 again?
Well, I was going to say, as a female model, the use of Adobe Photoshop would have been quite handy. I think, seriously, I've always loved English. And one of the reasons I've gone into marketing, I guess, is the power of the written word. And the thing that I've absolutely loved over the last few years, and particularly I think the Indie Ref showed the engagement that we all had with social media. So I think a role around marketing and journalism today would just be so exciting. I'm not knocking journalists from 15, 20 years ago, by the way, but the fact that our news is now driven by us in this room, and that we can report on news stories before any of the traditional media even know they're happening, I think is just incredible. So that whole digital engagement, social media, customer interaction. I mean, I enjoy talking to our customers via social media. They know they can get me, they know when they're online. It's just transformed the way that we communicate, not just from a business point of view, communicate from a family point of view, but also from a global point of view. The world has suddenly got a lot smaller.
And maybe to pick up on that point, and maybe as a giveaway, because we're heading towards the end of time here, I don't think there were any other hands in there, so forgive me. One of you, I think, Sherry, you asked who's on LinkedIn, and nobody put their hand up. And that social media phenomenon, that there's a LinkedIn generation, a Facebook generation, and now a Snapchat generation, and there's almost a clear divide between the three. But when I'm recruiting, if I see a CV or go after someone, I look at your online profile. I shouldn't, but I do. And I look at LinkedIn and see how well you're set up. Do you think it's important at this age to start building your... So the genie's out the bottle with whatever you've got out there now, and whatever you've done is out there. That's just happened. And we've all done that too. We've got that digital history. Do you think it's important now to think about, from a marketing, an employment, a public sector, citizenship, investment, employment and collaboration point of view as we work along the panel, to develop your digital brand personally now? How important would it be to these guys as a giveaway today?
I think it's absolutely vital, but I think the counterbalance to that is that I used to do some frightening presentations in the past where I'd be given somebody's name and within 10 minutes I found out everything I needed to know about them. I think the problem we have at the moment is because we're so used to just interacting with devices, we don't really think about things, is our personal security.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean stalking and things like that, but it amazes me to this day the number of people, for example, on Facebook that don't set the security settings so that I can actually read what their friends of their friends of their friends of their friends are doing, and that they're going away on holiday, so I now know that house is empty for a couple of weeks. So I think this whole, I do think you need a personal identity online, and I think you need to manage that. I mentioned it earlier, put the decent picture of you up, not the one of you hanging over a toilet on a Saturday night. That potentially has issues for employers, depending on which business you go into. So manage it, but also make sure that what you want to retain private, what you want to retain amongst your family and your friends is exactly that, retained. I'd like to say that all of us on this panel, I'm sure everybody in this room, we're all scrupulous people. But I do know of certain companies, recruitment agencies particularly, who will stop at nothing to understand what you get up to. So it really is worth ensuring that you have a managed professional, if you like, profile that's out there, and the personal one that you wish to keep amongst your friends, your mates, etc. Just check your security settings. That's all I would say.
Chris.
Yeah, I think if you're putting something online, you just want to view it as if you're meeting a stranger. And what would you want a stranger to think of you when they first meet you? And that I would restrict probably my online presence to that. But I do remember when Microsoft first launched Office, I think it was 2010, that included a photograph in your personal profile. Then a lot of my professional account executives started having photographs of themselves in bars in Kuala Lumpur appearing in their professional profiles, and it was all a bit embarrassing for a while. But it just reinforced the point that if you want to create an image, and actually that image, you might want a mental image on your social media, so go ahead. But just be aware that whatever image you're putting out there is the image that people have of you because they don't know you.
Sally?
I think it's really important. In the public sector, we are definitely not encouraged to look at anything online when we're interviewing people. I don't do that, but I do know colleagues who do. And they really put a lot of store on what you are saying online and how you're presenting yourself online. So I would just echo and say that you need to be careful.
Okay.
I think I'm going to don my LinkedIn hat just for a second. So I've been on the advisory board of LinkedIn since 2006, since it had 10 million users, and it now has 320 million users. And the company allows, and I know that nobody here uses it. So two things that may be of interest is that in the last 4 months, we lowered the age of being able to use it from 18 to 13. And one of the fastest growing demographics that we have are 13 to 18-year-olds. And of course, they're not working, but what they're using it to do are follow companies, set up alerts so that when the CEO of Apple puts a new blog on a new product, they get it they get a notification.
Yeah.
So it allows them to track the companies that they're interested in. It's kind of different the way that different genders are using it. The girls are often using it to talk about their Duke of Edinburgh awards or projects. They are using it to upload the music, so they're going through music exams. Everybody around this age, you know, sort of like, well, this is my grade 5 voice. You know, this is me on the violin with the cello, and they upload videos and they express, you know, themselves, you know, in a professional sense of the things, the extracurricular things that they're interested in. And I think it's really important if you can, by the time you come to think about what job you may want, let's say you're 13, maybe it's when you're 23, you can go to Apple and you can say, well, actually, you can see from my LinkedIn profile, I've been following you since that day and whatever it was. And I've read every blog your CEO has written, and I'm looking at the product developments. It allows you to follow the things that you're most curious about. The other thing that they did recently is they allowed for every single university, and this is live now, in the UK, you can look at all of the universities and see where the graduates have gone and what they're doing. And it's not hypothesis, it's built up from the data. And it's very strong. And because it's built on data, it's utterly verifiable. You can go look at University of Strathclyde, you can go look at what are the top 10 careers that have been followed. You can see whether or not they work for Microsoft, Google, whatever. You can see where they've gone. And you can click on those and you can see what subjects they chose when they were in school. And it allows you to explore the sorts of things that you might want to do far more easily, and it's very data rich. And you know, I know that we were talking about careers advisors. I totally use that website and take a look and see where, you know, and if you're interested in physics and there's a university near you and maybe nobody's ever done anything in physics after having gone to that university, I might choose a different one. You know, you now have the power, because the data and the information is there, to do that. Just a bit on privacy. I think that these big companies, and I put my citizen hat on now rather than corporate hat, would go out of business if you didn't control what people see. You need to recognize that it's your data. You can turn on the ability for people to share it or to not share it. One of the things between 13 and 18-year-olds is LinkedIn is you can't share it. We won't allow that. You'd have open. So the default for younger people is a much more private than the default for people who are over 18. And we've thought really carefully about that. And in terms of your own social media, I would never tweet my location or names of children and stuff like that, because I think it might put them, there are some people in the world and they can get access to that information. So I would be mindful. I think we all need to be mindful of what letting open or pictures, what letting that loose, it might end up in some hands that you don't want it to be in. And we all need to be mindful of it.
Absolutely. And just before we move on to you, Robbie, there's still that human interaction that shouldn't be missed, because I thought I got a great photograph of you today in my presentation, but you hate it. And all it would have taken for me is an email to you saying, can you supply me a photograph that's suitable for the presentation? So I've gleaned all that information offline. I've gone, that's a great photograph. Look at the depth and the colour and everything else. And who I'm presenting on hates the image. I hope you forgive me in that one.
It was a really bad hair day.
Robbie, maybe to conclude.
Yeah, the whole thing about having terrible, embarrassing histories on your social media, from our point of view personally, from where I'm sitting, is it's maybe 1% of the formula of whether or not you get employment with us. You know, if you're doing something very, very illegal or extremely bad, like keeping someone at the bottom of your garden down a pit or something, then you're probably not going to get a job with us. But the important thing is, if you use the social media like an online CV, if you're putting up demos of your work, if you're a programmer, putting up little demos, lots of places you can do that online. Artist, there's no excuse putting up your portfolios online, and not just as a formal drop, but every Tuesday or something you're putting up and you're showing you're keen, you're hungry, you're doing stuff. And then it all comes down to how well you can communicate. So I wouldn't stress too much about that embarrassing photograph on that beach, which you will probably have at some point in the next 5 years. Yeah, the important thing is just show you're keen. Now, everyone has fun and does things that might upload things they might regret. It's not the end of the world. Yeah.
And think of yourself as that red dot amongst all those apps. How do you stand out from Google? They say they get 10,000 CVs a week globally. 10,000 CVs a week globally they get submitted. Now, some of those are written in crayon, and I want to be the next Larry, but some of those are, a lot of those are pretty smart people. So how do you differentiate yourself? And building that digital social profile up with relevant content, and you've never had, the thing at 16, you've never had the opportunity to build your CV and persuade people honestly than we've ever had in our generation. So it's a unique opportunity. We need to close off now for various reasons. I'd just like you to thank Robbie, Sherry, Sally, Chris, and Phil here for their input in their presentation, their time today. Please use us as schools. Please feed back into us through the mechanisms that we flagged up today for you, and get us involved, because we want to be involved. But if you could share your appreciation to the panel, please, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.